Alrighty, folks, it's here. Patch 2.18. Yeah, Pog, we're in it. Let's just kick it off. Just gonna read through it. This patch kicks off the Between Worlds ranked season, and with it comes a major update on live balance, a variety of card updates, and some quality of life changes and bug fixes. Let's get to it. Alright. As promised, back at the launch of Beyond the Bandlewood, we've got quite a few card updates for this patch. Before we jump into that, though, we wanted to share an update on the overall philosophy and targets for live balance moving forward. That's good. It's really nice to hear from the developers regarding the balances and the patching, because I think we can all agree that it's been a little bit light on the patches. There could definitely be more patches, and that would be solid. So that's basically what they're saying here, right? A fairly long TLDR. We feel that live balance updates are important to improve LoR's overall player experience, and so moving forward, expect to see regularly occurring scheduled card updates targeted towards impacting the meta, nerfing clear overperformers, buffing underperformers, and generally improving deck diversity. These updates will be staggered in between expansion releases. That's great. I think that sounds like exactly what they need to be doing right now. The card updates in this patch were built using our updated philosophy, so you can expect something similar in scope and priority in upcoming patches as well. Fantastic. More of what they're doing here. I love to hear that. For those interested, let's get into a little more detail on exactly what this philosophy entails. Otherwise, feel free to skip down to the 2.18 card updates below. So let's go ahead and read through this. Just read everything. What is a live balance philosophy? We use this terminology a lot, so it's important that we're all on the same page as to what it exactly means. For the LoR gameplay team, our live balance philosophy is the set of principles that determines what could or should be changed, when it should happen, and why we do it. It's a live balance philosophy because changes are largely determined by data from gameplay on the live server, on the top surveys, direct player feedback, and our gameplay analysis team, the GAT, a team that play tests and advises on various aspects of cards and overall balance considerations before they go live to players. So basically they're saying they're going to pull out their GAT and they're going to start blasting. I love it. That's great. We need more GATs. We need more GATs. How are we supporting live balance moving forward? Internally, we're organizing our processes and refining our priorities for live balance to ensure we'll have consistent, impactful card updates during each expansion cycle. We'll be planning for regularly scheduled balance patches to hit between expansion releases. We avoid significant balance patches immediately upon an expansion's release, since the new cards will inherently impact the existing meta and it can take time for things to develop and settle. Makes sense. Too much time between releases and card updates, however, can lead to a feeling of a stale meta, which is exactly what's happened the past 2 or 3 patches, it feels like. Things just got really stale. The same decks were on the top. I am in love with the philosophy here. Everything they're saying is great. Moving forward, the hope is that this new set of processes and priorities will address the feeling of a stale meta in any decks that are breaking metrics quickly, rather than having to wait months for a new release. I think that they've hit the nail on the head here. I think that Riot really has been listening to everyone that has been a part of the community. They're really listening to the community here. And that is, I'm getting goosebumps because it feels great to be listened to. and appreciated. This warms our hearts, Riot. Thank you. All right. Ooh, I love big pictures. That's too big. All right. So July, August, September, October. Here we are. New ranked season starts. Seasonal tournament, battle academia skins, and cosmetics. All right, that's all pretty much done. We've done that. November, major PvE expansion. Now that is pretty darn exciting. It's so exciting, I can't even pronounce words. I'm spitting everywhere. It's gross. I'm gonna power on. That's really darn exciting. That's gonna be phenomenal. I was a huge fan of the initial PvE. Anything that can let new players experiment in a less competitive environment is a wonderful tool. Anything that lets you feel the power of being in control is just great for anyone who's playing the game. From a gameplay perspective, that's great. And on top of that, they have made sure to at least try to add significant challenge to it, like with the legendary difficulty of the Lab of Legends. They really made it pretty difficult on the legendary setting. It actually gets kind of challenging there with some of the champions. So the fact that they're putting more effort into that, love it. Love it. New themed event. That's exciting. I have no idea what that's going to be, but I bet you it's going to be pretty darn cool. Mega Event Pass. Give us the money. We want your money. They want our money, guys. They want our money. And we're going to give it to them. Who are we kidding? I'm broke and I'm still going to freaking buy it. Hello. New expansion. Magical Misadventures. That's pretty exciting. I am looking forward to that. I'm glad that they're not letting up on the new content. That's fantastic. Another seasonal tournament. I love it. New ranked season start. Fantastic. Another 2 months of grinding. Grind. I'm gonna grind it. All right. That's fantastic. 2021 roadmap. That's what that was. I'm glad that I read that at the end. Now I know what it is. I didn't know what it was before, but now I do. Now we all do. It's great. In most cases, that means you'll see a balance patch every other month. Nice. Due to a staggered release schedule throughout the remainder of the year, however, our next live balance patch is scheduled for January 2022, a month after the release of the Magical Misadventures expansion. After that point, you should see a live balance patch about every other month. That's great. I think that's completely reasonable. New expansion, little bit of leeway there. I'm completely okay with that. Why are we updating our live balance philosophy? Because everyone was complaining about sucked. That's why. To put simply, it's more fun this way. Yeah. Sure, that's exactly what I said. We don't want to actively punish decks that are performing well, but we know it can be a drag to constantly face the same meta decks as Azir Aurelia for an extended period of time as Azir Aurelia. That's not necessarily a new philosophy, but what is changing is the rate and consistency of changes moving forward to more directly address that particular pain. Hallelujah. Great. This is great. They better actually do it. They better actually do it. We also have additional guardrails to inform what kinds of changes we want to make, which we'll get into next. What are our targets? What are our targets? What are our What are targets for live balance? This patch is our first crack at a set of card updates under our updated live balance philosophy, so it should serve as an example of what to look forward to with future balance updates. The focus here is to tone down some cards that are overly impactful in the current meta, reduce frustrating matchups, encourage greater region diversity, and improve overall quality of life for some underplayed champions and archetypes, and encourage experimentation with them. Those are all fantastic things. That's exactly what you want to hear whenever a developer is talking about their gameplay. You're not gonna have any of that coming from like EA or Activision. You never we think we have it bad here with Riot. It's not even close. Those guys, people who are into COD really big, and that's their grind, I feel bad. I feel bad for them, because those developers don't give a We're excited to finally be able to share these details with you all! As always, we'll continue to keep an eye out for feedback and thoughts around this update to make sure we're hitting our goals and addressing genuine plans to offer the best possible experience in Legends of Runeterra. Without further ado, let's get into the changes coming in this patch. Yes! Alright, finally! Now that all that freaking nonsense is out of the way, we can actually look at the important stuff. The words, get to the cards already. Okay, we're at the cards. Fantastic. I love to see this right off the bat. Turning Nami into Sushi. This is a humongous change. The fact that you can't level her up on turn 4 without gaining more mana, I don't even know if it's possible to level her up on turn 4 now, which is humongous. It was just I hate the, if you have it, you win kind of gameplay. There's no counterplay there. If you have the correct set of cards in the correct order, you just win. That's not fun. That's not interactive. That's not good gameplay. That's something that happens a lot in Magic, because Magic is a completely different game, by the way. Let me just put that out there. You'll have insanely powerful decks that are uninteractive and just completely dominate, and it really depends on the rule set that you're following, but in just I'm not even sure what to call it, but if you're playing just open, I suppose, without any structure to it, Magic can turn into turn 2 lethals, and it's insane. And that's kind of what Nami feels like. It feels like when you hit the nuts, you just win, and that's too good. It's just too good. Too explosive, leveling up as early as round 4, so we're increasing her level up requirement. Fantastic. That's great. It's not killing her. It's not actually turning her into Sushi. She's not completely dead. Fantastic change. I'm very happy. And speaking of happy changes, look at this. Draven is Mystic Shot fodder now. Yes! 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 Draven! He is now fodder for Mystic Shot. He can be traded. He can get killed by the Hawk. By the Demacian 2-1 Challenger. He can get killed by Mystic Shot. I've said that 5 times already. He is so much more vulnerable now, but he still has a quick attack, so he's still going to be very powerful. But now, it's not so much you just play Draven on turn 3 and you have won that round, essentially. It is possible to lose tempo after playing Draven on turn 3, which is good. I think that is very healthy. If you don't have removal for the Draven, which is much easier now, then you're punished. And you get Draven doing Draven things. Draven is coming in! you still get to have the power of Draven spiraling his axes into your face repeatedly. But it's a little bit easier to deal with now. And I think that's great. The stats show that Draven was just too powerful. He was everywhere. He was everywhere. And I just don't really think that it was very healthy. So just bringing his health down 1 is humongous. That is a huge nerf. Huge nerf. Next set of changes, Tristana, level 2 now grants herself impact as well as her allies. Okay, that's great. And I like this note right here. This is our next set of changes for champions in this patch focuses on quality of life updates for champions who could use just a little extra help to enable their potential. Basically, they're saying we just needed to nudge them a little bit, and we hope that it changes things. But most of these changes aren't going to do jack. Tristana is a very fun card. It's still not going to be that good. Nocturne level 2 now retains Nightfall, grant an enemy vulnerable, and give enemies -1 this round. I don't suspect that this will change much about Nocturne, to be quite frank. I think that he still suffers from being, Nocturne. Echo, level 1. You've predicted 5 times is now you've predicted 4 times. This is something that I think is going to be a humongous change. Now you only need to find about 3 of your cards. 3 of your predict cards. And that's, naturally, without having to predict for them. If you draw 1 or 2 predicts in your opening hand and you have an Echo, it is so much easier to level that Echo now. I think that's humongous. He still gets Mystic Shotted, which I think is okay. The big payoff, the wet dream for Echo is you get all of the synergy, you cast all the spells, and you get this humongous attack. And then you do it again. And that's fantastic. And it's so powerful. And I'm really glad that it's attached to a rather fragile champion. Because otherwise it would just be unfun. It would be like Nami. It would just ruin everything. So I think this is a great change. I am looking forward to new Echo support. And that's really what Echo is missing right now, is he doesn't have a deck that really caters to him very well. And requiring less predicts is a huge deal because there's just not that many predicts in the game right now. And that is great for Echo. Great news. This one I'm personally very excited about. Aurelion Sol only has to have 20 power. This is a revert. He used to be this way. They nerfed him, and now he's back. Dragons are back, baby. Dragons are... Dragons are back. This is exciting. This is... I'll talk more about the dragons later. I'll talk a little bit more about Aurelion Sol. That's like an extra 5-drop. That's about 5 mana worth of attack that you don't have to have anymore. So that's what that essentially means. You only have to have 20 power. That's 4 big units instead of 5 big units. And that's huge. It's almost the same as the Echo buff. It is not actually the hugest deal, because you could honestly get there with, the way dragons work, you could get there with 3 dragons. 3 big, beefy boys. You could get to 25 power. But now it's just a little bit easier. I think that's great. Renekton has needed some love desperately ever since he was created. This poor, innocent baby. What did he ever do to deserve such treatment? I was so hyped when they released him. I was like, oh man, this is like Shyvana but better. And it's just really difficult to level him up. It's really difficult to get him to survive 2 hits. He only has 4 health. 5 health if you challenge an enemy. If you give him a buff, he has 1 extra health. Potentially twice. So it's almost like he has 2 extra health. This is a humongous change. One of the things that I would always run into whenever I played Renekton is I would have him at 10 instead of 12. Because you challenge once, he attacks with 6 damage. You don't challenge again. You challenge once, and then you attack again without the buff, he only has 4 attack. And that's only 10 damage. Now you only have to give him Challenger once in order for him to level up. That's huge. You could, in theory, level him up on 1 hit. It's still pretty difficult to find 6 damage. Is there any possibility? What's the name of the card? That awful card. 4 mana, give your minion plus 5 attack? Something like that? That isn't gonna make Renekton good. It's still not good enough. If you play that card and you give Renekton, you give something vulnerable, give Renekton plus 2 attack. Okay, I can see this being pretty nice. That's a pretty nice change. It's not going to be a huge deal. Renekton is still Renekton. It's not going to be a huge deal. Now this is a big change. This is humongous. 1 whole mana cost off of Lux. All of the control players are nutting themselves right now. This is exactly what we need to see. I love control. I love the idea of having an answer for everything in my deck and just having to play it right, play it at the right time and in the right way, knowing the deck, knowing my deck, knowing the opponent's deck, and outplaying my opponent. And just having the answer every time is, oh, yes, that's good. This is humongous. Now you don't have to save. You can play Lux on turn 5 like Karma. Now you can play Lux on turn 5 and then next turn level her up without having to save any spell mana. That's humongous. That is such a big deal. You can do that a turn earlier now. That's really what's going on. And the fact that you only lose 1 attack, who cares? You get to keep... Excuse me. Ugh. You get to keep the barrier. Which is honestly the biggest deal. That's what makes Lux even borderline playable, is the fact that you can drop her down on the board on a defensive turn and block with her and be safe. You don't lose too much tempo when you play a Lux, and now you lose even less tempo. This is phenomenal. And not to mention, now she's a win condition. Not only is she clearing the board, she is a win condition in and of herself. She can end the game by herself. Well, sort of. You still need the support cards to give her the lasers. She doesn't have lasers herself, which is kind of strange when you think about it, but I'm okay with it. It's a really cool card design. I love Lux. This is gonna be a ton of fun. I'm not sure if she will be tier 1. I'm not confident saying that she'll be tier 1, but she's going to be much stronger than before. Much stronger than before. At least tier 2. Solid tier 2. Maybe even tier 1. Maybe. We'll have to see. With a lot of the nerfs that happen and some of the buffs that are happening here, the meta's gonna change quite a bit. So let's keep moving on. Quinn is a 3/5. She gets 1 more health. Beautiful. There's a lot more powerful 3/4s in the game. And you're paying 5 mana for this card. Remember that. This is a champion that you're paying 5 mana for. You do get the Valor, the 2/1. So you're paying 5 mana for 5/6 in stats now, which is in line with some of the recent buffs. One buff in particular that we'll get to later. This is, I think, a much-needed buff for Quinn. We used to have a very Quinn-dominant meta with the Scout Rally effect. We're never going to have that again with the nerfs to Rally that we'll see later on. But, well, it's not impossible. With new cards, we could see a return of the Scouts. But right now, the Scouts just aren't powerful enough. They're just not good enough. So this is a great change. A little bit more health. And the same with Braum. Braum is a fun card. I love the theme. It looks like one of those fucking memes. This is what he sees versus what she sees memes. That is this card. That's what Braum is. It's great. He has 1 more health. That's great. I think that's a great change. I love the theme of Braum. Who doesn't? I'm not gonna finish that sentence. All right. Off of Braum. Sparklefly. Gone. In the trash. Into the gutter. It's gone. Sparklefly's gone. And that's all I need to say about that one. Twin Blade Revenant Challenger is now fearsome. Thank you. Thank you. This fits the theme of what Noxus does so much better than Challenger. Noxus and Challenger doesn't really make sense. There's that one 4-mana 3/3 that has quick attack, and that's kind of how they get away with it. It's like they give it quick attack so for 1 turn, so it's Noxus. But I've never really equated Challenger with Noxus. And this card being fearsome now instead of Challenger is huge. It's a huge nerf. Just to be clear, this is a huge nerf to Twin Blade Revenant. And Lost Soul, in turn, they're the same card, basically. This is just... It was too much value, and I think that's exactly what they said here. It's shutting down enemy boards. Exactly. There's just too much value for free over and over and over and over. It just is too much. A little bit too much. A little bit too much. I love the idea of like zombies coming back from the grave. Unkillable, unstoppable machines. I love that. That is flavor. And I love flavor. It's just good. It's so good. And fearsome, it makes so much more sense. This guy isn't challenging you. He's scaring the piss out of you. You just killed him and he's coming back. You kill him again and he comes back again. That's terrifying. I would not want to fight that. That's absolutely gross. And I love it. Great. Great change. Tenor of Terror, this is a much needed nerf. And I love that they're keeping the flavor. The little bit of poetry here. As who's that director? It's not Steve Jobs, which is the dumbest shit I think I've ever said. He directed Star Wars, George Lucas. Hey guys, remember that time I forgot who George Lucas was? As George Lucas would say, there's poetry here. It's a 1-3, and this is a 3-1. You can ping it off now with Vile Feast. Give it to me. Tasty. That's juicy. That's exactly the kind of thing I like to see. You're still getting 2 bodies for 4 mana, which is... This card is still going to see play. This card is still going to be good. But now there's a little bit more counterplay. And I think that's exactly what it needed. It's not 5... It's basically 5 mana worth of stats for 4 mana. And it's almost 6 mana worth of stats for 5 mana. And it's just too powerful. It's just too powerful. I love this. This is a nudge in the perfect direction. Yes, precisely. Relentless Pursuit. It costs 4. It's just a worse version of Aegis now. This is just a worse Aegis. Minor buff to Taric rally decks. But other than that, this is great, because as we're gonna see later on in the video, dragons are back. We already kind of touched on it a little bit. We dipped our toes into the water. This is a much needed change. Slight sort of reverse backwards Monopoly Backgammon Underwater buff to the Dragon Guard Lieutenant, or whatever, the Dragon Guard Scout, whatever that shitty 3/5 if you have a dragon rally. That card is a little bit better now by virtue of being a 2 mana 3/5 with rally. So when you think about it, you're paying 4 mana for rally now, no matter what. Now that rally is a 4 cost card, I can see that card still not getting any play. I don't think that card's going to see any play. Maybe now that Relentless Pursuit is not 3 mana. This is a much needed change, by the way. I do not like... I just personally do not enjoy getting stomped on turn 4 by Poppy and Lulu. I'm not a huge fan of that. And I love to see this nerf. Personally, love it. One of the things that was kind of a problem with Demacia is that rally became too much of their core identity, and it must have been very scary for them to nerf Relentless Pursuit like this because of that. But they are buffing dragons in a big way, so I think that dragons are the new Demacia, which is still kind of weird. Demacia is supposed to have this anti-magic theme to it, but there's only one card that actually promotes an anti-magic theme. The cards, the inspectors or the investigators, like that series of cards, like when you cast a 6-cost spell, it gets a buff. That doesn't... It promotes spell gameplay, which makes sense from a balance standpoint, like you're working with Lux, but it doesn't make any sense when you think about it from a flavor perspective, from the lore of what's going on behind the cards. These cards are supposed to be hunting down mages, relentlessly pursuing mages, pun intended, to throw them in jail, oppress the minorities. It's evil. And it's exactly the kind of flavor that I love to see in my video games. But it doesn't make any sense. The cards benefit from spells being played, which could be a subtle way of saying, hey, even if you oppress the minority, you're still benefiting from the minority. That could be some big brain logic. That might be what they're trying to say there, but I kind of doubt it. I think they just weren't able to come up with a way to incorporate an anti-magic mechanic without it being unfun. Because there's not, like, counterspell, no one likes getting their spell countered. Like, oh, I got my 10 mana, I can finally cast Augmented Experiment, or whatever that card's called. 10 mana, boom! Oh, they spent 4 mana and... No, I just want to kill myself. Great! No one likes that. It sucks. So, I am glad that doesn't really exist very strongly. Like, they hint at it with that one card, the stony whatever the yeah. Anyways, I've talked too much about this. Let's get on to the next card. Stone Stackers, nerf, good, deserved. This having tough is so annoying. Being able to just, like, you may be thinking, hey, it has more health. Isn't that basically the same thing? Almost. Almost. The big difference comes in the fact that you can chump block this with a 1/1 now, and it doesn't die for free. That's the biggest impact of this nerf. You can block this card with a 1-drop. A 1/1 can block this card, and then you can Mystic Shot it, and it'll die. Before, you had to throw 2 Mystic Shots at this thing, or you had to have 3 attack. You had to Thermal Beam this for 3. You had to have a 3/2 on 2, which they don't really exist in Runeterra. There's not very many solid 3/2s in the game. There's just not that many of them. Not many decks have that. So this being a 2 mana 2/2 with tough was just frustrating. Just frustrating to play against this card. It always felt great playing Darkness. I've mained Darkness for a while now, just because of how good it feels to play the 2 mana 3/2 give your Darkness +1 attack. It feels so good trading with that into Stone Stackers. That is what that is justice, is what that is. But you don't always have it. So, like, on those games where you don't draw your 2-drop, but you did draw your 1-drop at least, you can now trade into it. Lovely. Worth. Big. Aloof Travelers is still going to throw away your Aurelian Souls. It's still going to discard your Dreadways and your everything. Your 10-drop spell, gone. Your 8-drop Farron, gone. It's still going to be gone. That hasn't changed. But now, and this fits in with the flavor too. I forget who made this point, but they are a certified genius, whoever made this point. Yordles are small. Yordles are not big beefy. Yordles are not chonky. They are tiny, tiny little creatures. Teemo is a 1/1. He is tiny. Like the... Teemo and all Yordles are very tiny. That's why Vigar has a whole complex about it. There's a whole there is a character whose entire character is being a Napoleon complex. That's his whole character. That's who Vigar is. So this just makes sense. Yordles should not be big. Yordles are small. And this stat change reflects that. And I want to thank Riot from the bottom of my heart. Even though I love this card. I love Aloof Travelers. I'm still going to be running at least 2 copies of this card in my control decks. Because, as the great Harstem says, you don't want to play a game to win or have fun yourself. You want to play a game to ruin your opponent's fun. You want to demolish their hopes and dreams. And that's what this card does. I'm gonna eat those words playing my Aurelion Soul deck. I'm gonna have so many games where I lose because I don't get Aurelion Soul. But whatever. It's worth it. It's worth it. A much needed nerf. It was just too beefy. It did everything. Now it's more niche. It has a role. You don't just play it on turn 4 and feel okay. You lose tempo if you play this on curve. Anytime you play this card, you're losing a little bit of tempo. So now you're going to have to actually think a little bit in order to use the card effectively, which is great. Moondreamer. Our next set of changes focuses on Targon as an individual region. We're buffing a number of cards that reinforce their strengths as one that goes tall through card creation. Moondreamer, he's a Thresh without Challenger, but instead of Challenger, you get to invoke a big, giant, beefy, big boy. I think that's great. That's fantastic. This is a much-needed change. Moondreamer it was already pretty dominant, pretty strong in Expeditions, which is a game mode that I love. I love Expeditions. That is my personal favorite game mode in Legends of Runeterra. But no one plays it. It sucks. But whatever. The meta's been kind of stale lately. On that note, it's like Dragons, Malefic Descent is just too strong. I hope they change that. I hope it's not going to change because they just buffed Dragons. So, whatever. It's a 3/6 now. It's beefy enough to warrant being a 5-cost card. It's good. Lunari Priestess, meh, whatever. Who cares? Solari Priestess, this is pretty significant. This was already a great card. Now it can trade with 2 health minions. Great. I love it. This is a great chart. A great change to a great card. We're going to be seeing a lot of Targon. A lot of Targon. A lot of Targon. Ravoon, Daylight's Spear. He's a 5/6. He is a chonky boy. Oh, lordy, look at that boy. He's thick. He is thick. He's a thick boy. I like this. I like thick boys. The Scourge. He has Overwhelm. Speaking of thick boys, this is great. This is a phenomenal change. Doesn't really do much, to be honest. Like, if you're playing the Scourge, you're kind of winning or losing the game off of that play anyways. Him having Overwhelm himself pushes him a little bit over. Like, you will start picking the Scourge over the big 9-drop and the big 8-drop now. Even the 7-drop in certain cases. Oftentimes, the 7-drop is just better because it doesn't require you to have a board in order to get the full value from it. But now it's a 10-10 with Overwhelm and Challenger. That's great. that is I always wondered why, like, they didn't have this to begin with. And I'm guessing it's because they were afraid it would be too powerful, which is a very relevant concern. I am slightly worried that it's going to be too powerful now. However, that is what Targon does. This is what Targon does. Targon makes big, beefy boys and attacks with giant monsters from space.
Space!
That's what Targon does best. And I'm happy to see that. Yes, and here we go. Here are the big changes that I am most excited about. I loved playing mid-range dragons. Zoe, Shyvana, Aurelion Sol. That's a strong deck. You can give your dragons Overwhelm now. This card, as Swim would say, was already a little low-key. This card is a good card. Draw 2 dragons is a strong effect. 3 mana draw 2 of anything is great. 3 mana draw 2 of a specific type of card, even better. Having the flexibility to use that 3 mana card to end games, this is a 3 of now. This is a 3 of. You will use this to give +1/+1 and Overwhelm to your big board of 2 or 3 massive dragons to end the game. That is exactly what dragons needed. This card is going to carry dragons. Top tier. I am predicting dragons. Tier 1! Tier 1! Baby. Tier 1! Ruined Dragon Guard is a 3/4! Oh! Yes! Yes, it is! Yes, it is a 3/4! Herald of Dragons? It's a 1/2! This is great! I hated playing this card on turn 3. It always felt so weak. But now you play it on turn 3 and you're like, BAM! What's up? I got a 3/4. You play Herald of Dragon on turn 1, you play it on turn 2, they Vile Feast it, you fucking cry. They ping it off with anything. Pokey Stick, they can 1 mana Thermo Beam it. There's a plethora of ways for this card to be removed for 1 mana. And you just cry. You just can't play the card. It's unplayable. You just lose any matchup that has a 1 damage ping when you play this card in your deck. But now they have to Mystic Shot it. I am so excited for Herald of Dragons to be Mystic Shot fodder. Yes! Now you trade evenly. You have to spend 2 mana to remove the Herald of Dragons from the board. This 2 mana into 3 mana into Shyvana with Dragon's Clutch to end the game. You'll be ending games on turn 6. You'll be ending games on turn 6. It's insane. You can play this on turn 2, play Shyvana the next turn, and then I love this card. I love this card. This is great. I'm so hyped for the dragons. I'm so ready for dragons. Dragons are back. Tier 1. Faces of the Old Ones. Finally, some miscellaneous buffs to round things out. Faces of the Old Ones. Yeah, this is pretty good. It doesn't die to your own frickin' cards now. You can run Avalanche and Faces of the Old One in the same deck now. Great. Vanguard Sergeant. I don't expect this to be a huge change. This doesn't really change much. Aggro is still going to wreck your face half the time. You're still gonna die to the mid-range decks. That's really what is gonna boop you. You're gonna face roll aggro decks with this card. With decks that run this card now. Because you can run Avalanche! But you're still gonna get pooped on by mid-range dragon decks. Okay. Vanguard Sergeant. This is great. This, yes, flavor and spice. This is great. Demacia decks can struggle to finish games without relying on rallies. Buffing the Sergeant helps make big wide buffs more viable for Demacia. Designer's notes, caps optional. Optional. This is a great change. This is a much needed buff. Elites, I love elites. I have a special place in my heart for elites. And I guaranteed am going to be running an elite deck on day one of the new patch with Vanguard Sergeant. It's gonna be great. It's not huge, honestly. This isn't really gonna change much. Vanguard Sergeant isn't gonna be the savior of Demacia. You can see this card be played in more decks now, though. A 3-mana 3/4 is very solid stats. You're usually seeing mana that stat line attached to 4-mana champions like Ziggs. Or the reverse of it with Poppy. It's a little bit less relevant because Poppy gets buffed when she attacks, but the 3/4 stat line for 3 mana, that's great. That's the new baseline standard for 3 mana. The power level has creeped. It is official. 3 mana cards are worth 3/4 in stats. They are no longer worth 3/3 in stats. They are worth 3/4 in stats. It has happened. Power creep comes for us all. But I'm kind of okay with it. It's gonna happen, folks. It's gonna happen. You can't avoid it. You can't not have power creep. You can't just like, oh, I don't want to have new wonderful effects and play types because, oh, it's scary. Like, no one actually says that. Des and Ada. Des and Ada's effect was inconsistent with similar darkness effects, so we've addressed that with this change. Cool. Neat. Doesn't really change much. Honestly, you might run one copy of this in a darkness deck now instead of Ruination. Yeah, I can see that. I can see this being run instead of Ruination in a darkness deck. Neat. Additionally, huge change here. Additionally, we've made rules changes. Man, they really rushed this out. Additionally, we've made rule changes to Trinket Trade. Rules changes to Trinket Trade, the Traveler, and Loping Telescope. These cards will no longer be able to create themselves when played. Yes, great. I hate this solves the problem, one of the big problems, only one of the big problems with the Mayor. You play the Mayor, you discover a Loping Telescope, you play the Loping Telescope for 1 mana, you discover another Loping Telescope, you play it for 1 mana, you discover another Loping Telescope for 1 mana, you play another Loping Telescope, discover another one for 1 mana. Ad infinitum. It's so dumb. Just in it's too consistent. It's like butter. It's like It's too smooth. It makes it too consistent. It's too consistent, too reliable. The fact that these cards can no longer discover themselves is huge. Huge. This is great. Moving forward, additional create cards will not be able to create themselves. Great. They've set a standard now. They're going to stick to it. Fantastic. I would expect nothing less. Upcoming labs updates. I do want to say that this isn't going to shake the foundations of these cards. They're still going to be very solid cards, and you're still going to be able to go very wide playing the Mayor on 3 with Loping Telescope and the 2 mana 3/2 and a Poppy the next turn, or something ridiculous like that. Poppy plus Loping Telescope the next turn. You're still going to be able to do that. It's still going to be very powerful, and you're still going to be creating cards. It's just not going to be an infinite combo like Hearthstone, you know. We're not Hearthstone gamers in this community. No. Upcoming, I just want to be clear, I don't hate Hearthstone. I played way too much of it and I burned myself out, and the RNG just got to me. It just got to me and it broke me. And I don't want to see that happen to I don't want to see that happen to Legends of Runeterra. Upcoming labs updates. I don't expect that to happen. I don't think that's going to happen. Riot doesn't need to make money with Legends of Runeterra. They make enough money with League of Legends and Valorant, honestly. Those are major bucks coming from League of Legends, allowing Riot to be free to create a beautiful and brilliant game. It's so good. So good. Upcoming labs updates. As mentioned in the 2.17 notes, a reminder that it's nearly time for some new experiments. Lab of Legends, Saltwater Scourge, and Ultra Rapid Draw will be cycled out, finally, Jesus, in patch 2.19 on November 10th. Be sure to earn your Malphite and Gangplank. Okay, here's one for the comment section. Gangplank or Gangplank? I say Gangplank. Gangplank card backs and get some high octane ultra rapid draw games in before then. Ultra rapid draw is a nice gimmick. You play one or two of them and then you've done it. It did not need to be here for as long as it was. Round start effect update. All round start effects will now resolve before game ending or unit killing effects. Okay. That has some pretty interesting implications, especially for decks like Xerath. Xerath decks are going to greatly appreciate this. And I suspect there is going to be an anti-landmark landmark. An end-of-round landmark effect that will destroy a landmark. I'm willing to bet. And that is why they made a change like this. I think there's going to be anti-landmark landmark cards. Or card. At least one. Prior to patch 2.18, round start effects resolved for the active player first. In practice, this meant a match with two players with full Bandle trees would have the active player's Bandle tree resolve first, ending the game. Now, the same situation will result in a draw. That's great, especially considering that they didn't nerf Bandle tree at all, really. That's great. I think that just makes perfect sense. It always kind of felt wrong to me that the active player would just win in that situation. Just because they're the active player. Like, if you've played the same cards and gotten, or at least ended up in the same game state You shouldn't just win based off of the RNG of whether you went first or second. That's lame. It's already lame enough that you're playing and losing to a freaking Bandle Tree deck. Blech. This change makes round start effects consistent with rules for round end effects, which resolve in the same way. Did not realize that. That is great. I love consistency, as long as there's not too much of it. Miscellaneous. Unit keyword displays have been optimized to show more icons without overlapping one another. This update is sponsored by the Arsenal. I love little changes like this. This is what I live for. Little, tiny user interface updates like that. Just, they tickle me. Ranked rewards from the Beyond the Bandle seasons are being distributed with the release of this patch as we kick off the Between Worlds ranked season. Good luck on your climb! Cool. Unique descriptions have been added for champion skins in the store and collection. Cool beans. Last, but certainly not least, the bug fixes. Fixed an infinite loop issue where Glorious Evolution, that's the name of the card, Glorious Evolution, would allow a player to summon Evershade Stalker an unlimited number of times. Well, why would you fix that? That sounds dope. That sounds dumb as f***. I love it. Fine. That's reasonable. Mimic will now correctly copy non-champion spells and will no longer reveal created cards to the opponent. Ooh, nice. That's actually pretty important. You can do some pretty tricky stuff with that. You can make people think, like, you can mimic a card, play a different card, and the card that you mimicked, you still have 2 copies of it. So later, when you play 1 copy of that, they're like, oh, he's already played 1 copy of that card, and I know he mimicked the other card because he wouldn't have wasted the mana for Mimic and then played the other card. That wouldn't make any sense. Duh. And you can totally debate your opponent. I love that. That's great. Fixed a bug where Prank could occasionally increase the cost of a card beyond playability or drop its health to 0. I'm kind of sad, but also glad. Pranks are not interactive. They are very annoying to play against. It is very fun to play as. It's the Teemo effect, essentially. You love playing it, hate playing against it. I kind of loved the idea that you could, if you pranked a card enough, you could drop its health below 0 and make it a dead card. I kind of liked that. I don't think that's a bug. I think that is a nerf. But they're putting it in the bug fixes because it makes sense to call it a bug, because it's like, oh, we never intended that to be that way in the first place. Whatever. It's decent. I can dig it. Regretfully, I can dig it. Spell Shield will now correctly block Strafing Strike. Great. I didn't realize there was an issue with that, but if there was an issue with that, it definitely needed to be resolved before the Big Dragon update, because Strafing Strike is going to be everywhere. Curious Shellfolk will now correctly create copies of champions when used with Predict. Yes! Yes! I thought it was so dumb that you couldn't predict champions. I mean, this is literally the same thing. It's like, oh, we totally meant for it to be that way in the first place. We're so sorry we didn't have it that way. But whatever, I don't care. That's great. I like that change. I love Curious Shellfolk. There's something so titillating about the gameplay of Curious Shellfolk. It just it gets me going. Great change. I love to see that. Overgrown Snapvine and Tristana will now display correct keywords. Cool. Great. I don't see how the Overgrown Snapvine had any issues with that, but the Tristana definitely, I could see some issues with that. Okay. Fixed an issue where Prank would not target landmarks in the opponent's hand. Great. So they moved Prank around a little bit. They nudged it in a couple of different directions. And I can dig that. Fixed an issue where darkness could be created in hand before a cast copy is resolved. So if I'm understanding this correctly, this is a pretty significant nerf to Senna, because you can no longer play the darkness and attack with Senna at the same time and get another darkness in hand, which I always thought was kind of clunky. Like, it doesn't really make sense that you should be able to do both of those at the same time. And it doesn't always make sense. Like, it doesn't... Like, it makes sense in a value sense. Like, you're getting more darknesses guaranteed. They can't remove your Senna before you can generate another darkness. But you are kind of put in this awkward situation where that card... It's the same thing with Kindred. That card is now marked. It is going to die. You don't really value that unit anymore. You can just block the Senna with it. So all you've done is use up your attack token to generate another darkness, which is fine. Using your attack token to generate a darkness is a great thing. I think that's much needed for a darkness archetype to even exist in the first place. But I am glad to see this change. It makes perfect sense. The way they have it now makes sense. Zillion's ability will now correctly duplicate Relic of Power and Sentinel's Horde. Interesting. Correctly? Does that mean it doesn't? Because it's a fleeting card. It doesn't copy fleeting cards. Otherwise, you could get infinite value with Zillion. You could play the same card literally every single turn, and that would be busted. That's interesting. Does this mean that Zillion will now be able to copy Relic of Power in Sentinel's Horde? Because that's a pretty neat little buff there, if that's the case. Fixed several UI, UX, and general visual bugs to improve overall game clarity. That's pretty simple. This is a great note to end things on. Very... doop, done. Good. And that's it! Hey! Alright, so, highlights. I went over pretty much everything. As much as I wanted to. I feel like I'm most hyped for Aurelion Sol and the dragons. I am digging the new dragon meta. I am a huge fan of the nerfs to Sparklefly and Nami. I never liked that game. I never liked playing that deck. I never liked playing against that deck unless I'm stomping them, in which case I loved it. But I never really enjoyed playing against Nami. I never really enjoyed playing as Nami. Just not very... It just wasn't my cup of tea, to be honest. It just wasn't my cup of tea. It wasn't what I wanted from a deck. So I'm happy to see those nerfs, happy to see Draven nerfs, happy to see some of these quality of life changes. I like to see the Renekton buff. I love to see this Lux buff. This is, like, it's almost as good as Karma, the Karma buff. The Karma buff was so much better because Karma is actually viable as a game plan. Make it to turn 10, your cards are broken now. Great. There's definitely going to see a lot of experimentation. People are going to try to make this work. So if it can work, it will be done. Guaranteed. But I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's still going to be tier 2, maybe low-end tier 1, maybe. The fact that Lux is a win condition now might push it into tier 1. Might. Quinn, great. Braum, great. I love this change. That's great. This is great. There's so much goodness here. This is I love this patch. I love dragons, so I love this patch. This is this is a dream come true. This is great. I'm in love with it. Everything about this patch is wonderful. I love big boys. In any game, big boys are best boys. I love playing Malphite and just ramming an entire team and just stomping through and just surviving every hit. Nothing can stop me. Yes. Just that. That's all. That's what I live for. So yeah. Patch notes. Done.